Just off the top of your head, Lucas, what does psychological barriers mean to you?
We've talked about a couple of different things and regularly go back to it where I said, do this if that excites you. The psychological barriers are more or less the exact opposite of that. So, what are the things that cause you to feel not excited? Is it a messy workspace? Is it the fact that you have to get yourself dressed up, right? Because this is a branded approach to connecting with your audience. And being branded, you need to be inside the image of your brand. So if your brand is, say, if you're a workout woman and your brand is yoga pants and a sports bra, then for better or worse, you sort of signed yourself up to showing up in yoga pants and a sports bra every time you turn on the camera.
Welcome to PvP.fm, brought to you by Push Button Podcasts, your go-to resource for grabbing attention, building awareness, and creating authority in your marketplace. I'm Richard Matthews, your host and guide through the wonderful world of podcasting as a driver of business. Here, we teach how to use a multimedia podcast as the cornerstone of your omnipresent content marketing strategy. Whether you're an entrepreneur, podcaster, expert, or thought leader, you'll discover creative ways to leverage your digital content. From blogs to video, from YouTube to TikTok, and everything in between. I'll show you how to stand out from the noise so you can directly connect with potential customers, build strategic partnerships, and drive leads into your business. Get ready for actionable tips and tangible takeaways on improving your digital presence across the board. With that, let's dive into this week's episode of PvP.fm. Oh, and welcome back to the PvP.fm podcast. I'm Richard Matthews, and I'm with my co-host here, Lucas Root. Lucas, you there?
I am here. Welcome
Awesome.
back.
Glad to have you here. We're on our third episode in our series on the 10 Commandments of Podcasting. And for just to go through them all again real quick, first commandment of podcasting is thou shalt have good enough production quality. We talked a lot about your studio lights, camera, mic, and backdrop. We'll talk a little bit more about that today. Number 2, thou shalt be consistent. And we'll talk about results over time. Today, we're talking about thou shalt remove the psychological barriers to recording, which is really, it's a furthering of how you have consistency. And then number 4 is thou shalt drive to an action. Number 5, thou shalt buy, borrow, and build an audience. Number 6, thou shalt gain awareness, attention, and authority. Number 7, thou shalt use multimedia. Number 8, thou shalt create derivative content. Number 9, thou shalt publish, announce, and promote. And number 10, thou shalt give good interview. So here we are, number 3, thou shalt remove the psychological barriers to recording. Just off the top of your head, Lucas, what does psychological barriers mean to you?
We've talked about a couple of different things and regularly go back to it where I said, do this if that excites you. The psychological barriers are more or less the exact opposite of that. So what are the things that cause you to feel not excited? Is it a messy workspace? Is it the fact that you have to get yourself dressed up, right? Because this is a branded approach to connecting with your audience. And being branded, you need to be inside the image of your brand. So if your brand is, say, if you're a workout woman and your brand is yoga pants and a sports bra, then for better or worse, you sort of signed yourself up to showing up in yoga pants and a sports bra every time you turn on the camera.
Yeah, or my red shirt, or Bob Ross's big hair.
Your red shirt, Bob Ross's big hair. And Bob Ross's big hair actually was a really cool story, especially for today. He more or less accidentally backed himself into a psychological barrier to recording. It turned out to work out just fine for him. He was able to work through it, but he hated the fact that he had to do his big hair every day. I didn't know that until you told me about it on this last episode. But that's exactly what we're talking about. What are the things that cause you to pause? Like, I don't know, I don't want to put on that collared shirt. Even though it's part of my brand, I just don't want to put on a collared shirt. Make sure that you know what those things are and do the best that you can to make sure that they're not part of your brand.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to take it one step further and talk about I call them psychological barriers or psychological encouragements to action. And I like to talk specifically about environmental things. And what I mean by environmental things is making it so that it's easy to take the actions you want to take. And it's the things that would keep you from taking the action you want to take are removed. So I got 2 examples that really have helped me in my life. One of them is something really simple. And I think I've mentioned this story to you before. I have a water flosser, or like a water pick. Have you heard of those things you use to floss your teeth, except it like sprays water on your teeth. It's kind of cool. I've always loved them because I've never really liked the string floss. So I use one of these water flossers. And when I first got it, I kept it by the sink outside of my shower. Right, the sink, because I get up in the morning and you take a shower and you go and you do whatever you do with your face and your hair and your contacts and whatever else you're doing in the morning. I go there every morning. I figured I would just use it when I did my morning ablutions, to use a big fancy word for the day. And what I found was I never used it. It would just sat there on my counter. And one morning I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take it. And I picked it up off the counter and I moved it literally 3 feet from one side of the shower to the other side of the shower and stuck it in the shower on the counter in there in the shower. And because it's in the shower and I'm already taking a shower and it uses water and it was just really easy to use in there, I now use it every morning, right? It's removing a very simple psychological barrier to action. The other one is, I call it a piano drawer. And it's actually something my mastermind and our whole mastermind talks about this regularly, is like, what's your piano drawer? And I, for the longest time, I bought a piano and I actually have it sitting here in front of me on my desk. And the used to live sitting up here on the wall, just sitting on the side. And when I wanted to practice it, I would have to pull it down, clear off the desk space, make a spot to plug it in and put it all up on my desk, and essentially set it up so I could use it. And I had it for 2 years and practice on it maybe 3 or 4 days over that first 2 years. And then one day I had a stroke of inspiration. I was like, what if I rebuilt my desk and I made a spot for my piano in it and put it on some drawer slides? And that's what I did. And so I rebuilt the spot. So it was literally, it's sitting under my keyboard drawer. So like my keyboard drawer on my desk that holds my keyboard and mouse for my computer. And then under that, my piano pulls out and it's plugged in. It's already there. And I'd have to turn the volume up so you can hear it. But it's like literally sitting in front of my desk. And now when I take 5-minute breaks at work or I need to have a few minutes between calls, it's really easy to push in my keyboard drawer and pull out my keyboard and take some time practicing. And it took me about 6 weeks from installing my keyboard drawer to go from not knowing how to play the piano very well to being able to read music and being able to play songs with my wife on the ukulele. She's a musical genius. But anyways, she was like, you got really good really fast. And a lot of it was just changing the psychological barriers to actually practicing, right? Because I changed my environment a little bit. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is how do you set the environment up so that it is easy for you to record? And that's the why. We talked in the last call, content structures, the what, why, how, and now. What are psychological barriers? Why do they help? And then we're going to talk a little bit now about the how can you set up remove the psychological barriers to recording. Now, obviously, we can't help you with all of those things, because if there's things like your Bob Ross hair or the outfits that you're doing or what your studio location looks like and whatever, there's things that we can't help with. But there's a few categories that we can help with. And those 3 areas that we're going to talk about, because this is something that, because we run a podcast production firm and I see these problems a lot. And so there's 3 categories. 1 is your studio. Number 2 is having a content library. That's having ideas for things you could talk about. And number 3 is knowing what to say after you hit the start record button. So we're going to cover all 3 of those sort of briefly today and get into it. So first one is the mini studio. And the mini studio is something we talked about in both of the last 2 episodes, but we're going to bring it up here again because it is important. And it's one of those things that, again, you want to show up and you want to show up looking well. You don't want to, as Lucas puts it, you don't want to f it up, right? As long as you don't f it up on a regular basis and you show up consistently, you can make an impact with your audience. So the only thing that we're going to just talk about here, because we've already covered this really well, if you want to know what we're talking about, go back to episode number 1, is just make sure you have set up your studio. Right. And then, so there's two pieces that I want to just call out for this. One, make sure that it is either permanent, right? So you don't have to do any work to set it up, or it's simple and easy to set up, or some combination thereof, right? So my studio is semi-permanent. My camera mount, my microphone, my lights, and then the hooks that hold up my backdrop are all permanent. So my setup is legitimately, it's taking my camera that's sitting here, I snap it on, and then the other part of my setup is I hang the backdrop up. It takes me roughly 3 minutes to set up my studio for recording. So it's semi-permanent and it's easy to set up.
You put on your performance uniform.
And I put on my performance shirt. I put on my nice shirt. Oh, and I turn the lights on too. So like there's that whole process where I reach up and I turn this one on, and I reach up and I turn that one on. And then I reach over here and I flip the little, light switch for the third light. So I mean, it's a lot of work there to turn on the 3 lights, but that's how I set mine up to make it. It's semi-permanent, but it's easy to set up. So what's your process on yours?
You actually got to witness part of it today. I do my hair. We've talked about my hair in a few other episodes, but I do my hair. And one of the things that I care about, and it is branded, and fortunately for me, I actually like it, but it is branded, is this curl right in the middle of my forehead. Like, people recognize my hair. It's part of what they recognize. And if I don't spend at least a modicum of effort making sure that it looks the way that it does, then I'm not going to fit in quite the way that people expect. Right. So remember, don't it up. You have to look the way people expect you to look. You have to show up. If you're a workout girl, you have to show up in those yoga pants and a sports bra most of the time. So I have to, this is my version of yoga pants and a sports bra, and I have to do it every single time. So I do my hair. I turn on 3 lights just like you do, and then I'm done. I'm ready to go.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's easy because the
sometimes
rest
I
of your
have to
stuff
put
is
on.
permanent. Sometimes you go full Wolverine and just
If that was branded, I would be all in.
all in, yeah. And when you were talking about the curl, it reminded me of when Trump was our president, how often people talked about the tie that he picked, right? Because he always wore a suit, but his tie was always crazy. It's like it was part of his
Mm.
brand. And I'm almost certain he did it intentionally for the extra press that it got him for people because they would talk about his tie, which is, it's a ridiculous thing, but it was part of his character. And in the same way with the curl on your hair, my wife loves that curl in your hair, by the way. She tells me all the time. She's like, oh man, I love Lucas's little curl he's got on the front of his hair. So people do notice it. Because I don't think you've ever mentioned that to my wife that you do that intentionally, but people note it.
I do. I like I said, this is the way that my hair wants to be. I do pay extra attention to make sure that it fits the brand.
Yeah. So I don't want to spend too much time here because we did a whole episode on your studio, but I just wanted to cover those couple of things, right? That it should be either permanent or semi-permanent. And if it's semi-permanent, it needs to be easy to set up. So those are the things that you want to consider when you're putting together your mini studio. Now, onto the fun stuff we haven't talked about before. I want to talk a little bit about what I call your content library, right? And so this is one of those things that over the course of years working with clients, I've noticed is really it's a showstopper for people is they go, I want to record, but I don't know what to talk about, right? So there's two parts to that. There's the I don't know what to talk about. And then after I've started recording, I don't know what to say about the thing I want to talk about. Right, so we're going to cover both of those things and give you some frameworks that'll give you options to know what to talk about and then know what to say once you hit the start record button. Does that sound good?
Or an option on how to work around that.
Yeah. So
Yep.
first one, and we have tools for these. They're little PDF documents. Eventually, we might turn them into a software document. So we'll put them up on the website. And you know what? We'll probably put them up under pbp.fm/content or maybe content tools. But let's go with content because it's nice and simple. /content. And we'll put these
Nice and
tools up
simple.
for you. Yeah. And so the first one is what I call your 1-year content planning tool. It's really easy. And I'm going to walk you through how you can put together a year's worth of topics that you can have for whatever your industry is that you can talk about. And then anytime you want to sit down to record, whether you're going to record one episode or batch record 4 or 5 episodes, you can just put all your content topics in a little hat and pull out a few and go for it. Or put them in an Excel spreadsheet and check them off like depending on your personality type, if you're a go with the flow kind of person or be real detail oriented, doesn't matter. The point is be consistent and record content. We're going to show you how to have content topics. So what you want to do when you're in this space is look at the areas that you have where you have expertise, right? So what are your areas of expertise? And we could probably do this a little bit live. Lucas, why don't you pick out for me what's one of the areas that you have expertise?
Can you get me started?
I can. So I could say flooring is an area of expertise.
Yeah,
You have an expertise in community building. You probably have an expertise in business strategy. I don't know if
I
we've
do.
mentioned this before or not, but there's a reason there's Pokemon up behind you there on the shelf because you do business strategy for the Pokemon company. So you have expertise in several areas. So if you were going to put together a content library of topics you could talk about, which one of those sort of interests you?
Let's say community.
Community. So you have an
I've
area of
done
expertise.
3 years worth of business strategy, so I'm going to say community.
So community is an area that you have expertise. And what we're looking for is all you're looking for is you're looking to have something that is high level enough that you could have a lot of areas you could talk about, right? And so you're going for a higher level topic, right? Not a super niche thing where you're just like, we're not talking about like how to build community around, I don't know, underwater basket weaving for toddlers, right? That would be very narrow. We're looking for more of a wide topic.
That would be
Um,
very narrow.
Very narrow. There's not a lot of underwater basket weaving by toddlers, I would imagine. So you have your area of expertise, and we're going to put together 5, possibly 6 areas of content topics. So the first one, you're actually witnessing us do right now. and it's called the 10 Commandments of. And the 10 Commandments of your area of expertise are there's this really cool stuff because these are the most important rules about your area of expertise. And by being the one who sets the rules, so to speak, you become the authority on the topic in your audience's mind by default. And there's a lot of powerful psychology behind creating influence with your content videos, but part of it is if you take the authority of saying, "Hey, these are the rules," then by default, people who are listening to you say these are the rules are going to associate you with authority. That's what we're trying to build, right? That's why we call it strategic influence. So I'm not going to ask you to come up with the 10 commandments of community building right now, but why don't you give me one example just off the top of your head of what you think one of the 10 commandments of building community might be?
Thou shalt create engagement.
Thou shalt create engagement, right? And it's a nice topic because it's the kind of thing that you're going to have to define those terms, right? What is community? What is engagement? What does it look like?
What
How
is
does it work?
create?
Yeah, what is create? There's meat there. And as you define those things for your audience, again, you're developing that authority, right? And you've seen us do that here, right? We've already talked about the 10 commandments of podcasting. Commandment number 1, thou shalt have good production quality, right? And we spent an hour talking about that. And we're on this third one now, thou shalt remove psychological barriers to action. And it lets you teach and build authority in your space. So your goal should be to come up with the 10 commandments of your space. And I wouldn't agonize too much about the order of them unless something is important, right? We talked a little bit about the order of the first two, right? Because they were important for what we're talking about. But if there is not an order, don't worry about the order too much. Just put them together and start recording the content on them. That
You
is
might
the first
discover
category.
the order later.
Yeah, you might discover the order later. But you get your
My
first.
my 5 elements of community, the first order that I came up with, I ended up changing later because I started creating content around it. And I was like, oh, interesting. Now I know what the order is.
Yeah, once you start creating content, you might change the order, which is perfectly fine. But you have your 10 commandments of your area of expertise. What's interesting is you can do this over and over again for the different areas that you want to have expertise in. So if you wanted to be known for business strategy and community building, you could build the 10 commandments of business strategy and you could build the 10 commandments of podcasting and put those both into your content flows and start to get known for both of those areas of expertise. So that's really useful. So on to the second category is one of my favorites. It's the frequently asked questions about my area of expertise. And the frequently asked questions are used to enter the conversation that's already happening in your audience's head, right? It shows your audience that you know where they are and that you understand them. And it also serves secondarily as really good search engine content because this is the stuff that people are typing into Google, that are typing into YouTube, that are typing into wherever because they're like, hey, I have a question and I'm looking for answers for it. So frequently asked questions are the things that they're already talking about, right? And I think one of the things that's really powerful there is the entering the conversation that's happening in their head. And I know you've talked about this before, Lucas, but why is that a powerful thing to be able to show someone that you know what's going on in their head?
So when somebody decides that they're interested in buying from you, they decide that they're going to buy from you based on more or less just two things and two things only. The first is very simple, and it's one of the things that we're talking about here is that you have to be in front of them when they're ready to make the buying decision. Part
Mhm.
of the reason why a podcast is such a powerful tool is because you don't know when your audience is ready to make a buying decision. It could be today, it could be tomorrow, it could be next week, it could be next month. And in order to be in front of them when they're ready to make a buying decision, you have to keep showing up over and over again, right? So you have to be in front of them when they're ready to make a buying decision. That's number one. That, by the way, in case you're wondering, that is the reason why having a storefront on Main Street is powerful, is valuable, is
Yeah,
because
they're
every
always
single
there.
time somebody drives by, if they're ready to make a buying decision, there you are right in front of them when they're ready to make a buying decision. So a storefront on Main Street is literally a marketing strategy. It is a marketing strategy, right? Storefront on Main Street podcast is the same thing and a whole hell of a lot cheaper and more consistently good than a storefront on Main Street. I'm not telling you don't have a storefront on Main Street. What I'm telling you is that a podcast helps you achieve the same goals in a way that is much more within your control. Okay. So, number one, you have to be in front of them when they're ready to make a buying decision. The number two thing, and I'm only putting them one and two in this way because of the way that we're having this conversation, but ironically, I'd switch them. But the number two thing, which I think is number one in importance, is they have to trust you to deliver what it is that you're selling. They don't trust you to deliver what it is that you're selling. then they will not buy from you even if you're right in front of them. So, example of that, the dollar store. The bar is really low. You don't go into the dollar store to buy high value things. So the trust level is really low. It's really easy to get somebody to spend $1. It's really easy to have a dollar store to operate a dollar store because they trust you to deliver what it is that you're selling. By comparison, high ticket coaching, really high bar. It's high ticket and it's coaching. You have to establish trust with your audience over a very long period of time so that they get to the point where they really do trust that you can deliver what it is that you're selling. And you still have to be in front of them when they're ready to make the buying decision.
Yeah. And the frequently asked questions are one of the ways that you are showing them that you understand what's going on in their head, right? Because you can answer the questions that they're asking themselves already. And what's fun is these, you'll see as we go through these content topics, that all of them work together synergistically to create that trust, right? So you're creating the authority in the space by creating your 10 commandments. You're getting into their head and showing them that you understand what they're thinking about by doing the frequently asked questions. And again, just for example's sake, what's one of your FAQs you have heard about community building?
The most frequently asked question that I'm getting is, does the community leader have to be the community owner? Which
That's an
is
interesting
very cool.
that's an interesting question.
It's so nuanced and there's so much meat there. I mean, I could write a book on that question alone.
Yeah.
It's so much fun. Early in
Yeah.
the community's life, yes, probably the community owner has to be the community leader. But what's beautiful about true community is that a leader will emerge to handle situations, right? So leader is actually situational. It's not a permanent title. And so that answer early on in the community, when there needs to be somebody that's driving things forward and continuing to repeat the purpose, the message of the community, the way that the community is growing into who they want to become, they, the community. Yes, the owner and the leader typically have to be the same person. But as situations start to arise that the community can grapple without the owner themselves driving through that situation, the project, the challenges, a leader will emerge to handle that situation. And it's typically not actually the owner anymore.
Yeah. That's really interesting. And I know you could talk about that forever.
Are you ready to amplify your influence and stand out from the noise? Join Richard Matthews on pbp.fm as he explores the power of podcasting, social media, and strategic content to boost your reach. You'll discover the latest trends in video, audio, and influencer marketing, plus unlock insider tips to create binge-worthy content spotlighting you as a leader. With upbeat energy and clear, empowering advice, Richard guides publishers, experts, and entrepreneurs on starting a podcast, improving social strategy, and connecting with your perfect audience. Visit pbp.fm and book a podcast strategy session to start spreading your message today.
Just going to give you another example. We'll get into this more when we get to this section of this podcast. But people ask frequently, how do I monetize my podcast? Right. And that's an interesting question. And there's a lot of meat there too, because a lot of people don't understand the purpose of their podcast. Right. And they think the purpose of their podcast is get enough eyeballs to sell advertising. Right. Because they see a lot of podcasts that do that. Right. And so they have that example of like, hey, there's these big podcasts like the Joe Rogan Experience or, the Daily Wire or other ones that are up there in the well-known podcast space. Their purpose is garner eyeballs, sell advertising to eyeballs. That's not the only purpose that you can have for a podcast. So the question has to have some reframing and to see how can you use podcasts in other ways and what are other ways that you can monetize it. For instance, my show on the Hero Show has no monetization built in. It is strictly for my monetization is almost entirely networking. Right. And so there's different ways to talk about it. And we can talk about different ways that you can monetize your podcast when we get to that. But that's an example of a frequently asked question people are asking about that you can really help build that authority by really answering the question well and answering it deeply. So that's the second one. Now, third, this one's my favorite. I love these because it's one of those things that like once you understand this and you understand how powerful it is psychologically, you'll want to do it all the time. And I call these your should ask questions. So your should ask questions are the questions you wish your audience knew to ask you, if only they know what you did about your area of expertise, right? And these topics show your expertise in an area because it shows that you know what your audience doesn't know about their topic. And it builds reciprocity because you're being generous and sharing things that they didn't even know about. And the most important bit is it gives them aha moments where we've talked about this before. Once you see it, you can't unsee it, right? Anytime you have one of those things where you're like, oh, and now you reframe the world for people. And anytime you give someone an aha moment, you create some sort of a magical connection. I can't really explain it. Maybe you can, Lucas. What's the power behind giving someone an aha moment?
Fun question. I don't have a good answer to that. I could probably pontificate, but I don't think this is the time. Let's come back to it.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. But when you give someone an aha moment,
Now you have me
when you're
thinking about it, and I'm not going to
yeah,
stop.
you're like, dang it, that's a question I wasn't prepared for. But yes, there's something to giving someone in your audience an aha moment. And that's what the should ask questions are designed to do. They're designed to give you a way to create aha moments in your audience that is going to come back and help build maybe that's why it's my favorite, because I don't have an answer for it, but I know it's powerful. So my suggestion is learn to do it. And so the way that you should ask questions is really simple. Is what do I wish my audience knew to ask me, but they don't? So I'm going to give you an example, and we're going to cover this later when we get into this series of stuff on this podcast. Is how do I silo my post-production work for my podcast? Right? Nobody who's doing podcasting is thinking to themselves, I should silo my post-production work. Because one, they don't know what siloing is, and they don't really know what the post-production work is that goes into their podcast. But once you sort of explain what it means and how it works, and I'm not going to go into like too much detail on what that means now, because we're going to do a whole podcast episode on it. But once you answer it for them, they go, oh, that makes perfect sense. Why would you do it any other way? But it's not the
Right?
default that they're going to do. It's not the way that they're going to approach it. But once they know, they're always going to do it that way. Do you have, I know I'm putting you on the spot here. Do you have an idea, like a should ask question people might ask about that you wish people would ask about community, but they don't know to ask because they don't know what you know about community?
Yeah, I do, actually. The first should ask is, how do I monetize? People don't ask that about community. How do I monetize community? The second should ask, boy, I wish people would ask that question. And the answer is nuanced. It's not a simple answer, but that's a thing that people should be asking all the time. How do I monetize? Because if they're asking that, then they themselves are engaged. And as soon as you're engaged with the idea of community, you're going to start building it. Community answers so many problems in our lives. Community makes life better in so many ways. So engage, ask. And again, the answer isn't simple, it's nuanced. The second
Yeah.
one, and this one's powerful, how do I create engagement? We talked about that in the frequently asked questions. How do I create engagement? How do I encourage engagement? How do I engage in the engagement that's being offered to me? Like, you're a member of a community there in Florida, and kids are going out and playing. And I know that your kids do, but let's say that they didn't. How do I get my kids to go join in the play? How do I engage in the engagement that's already there, in the opportunities that already exist?
Yeah. And
Should
there's a
ask.
lot of stuff you could talk about on that. And it's like we have to fight the urge to answer all of those questions here because that's not what the purpose of this is. But
Oh,
those
I
are
could.
they're
Yes.
yeah, they're fun, interesting conversations that you can
Yeah.
have in each of these categories. And when you approach your content from this, right? And again, my recommendation, take some time, put down at least 10 should ask questions about your area of expertise. Right? And there's a reason we're doing 10, and we'll get to that in a minute. So the next category is it's the next two categories, and they're flip-flop of each other. And there's a reason they're flip-flop for each other. So one is empowering beliefs about your area of expertise, and the other one is limiting beliefs about your area of expertise. Right. So an empowering belief is, let me come back over here, is beliefs that your audience, if they had them, would help them achieve success in that area. Right. It encourages your audience to take action and take forward movement. Now, the flip side of that, limiting beliefs, are beliefs your audience has about your area of expertise that are holding them back from taking action or keeping them from success in that area, right? And if they're holding these beliefs, then it's stopping them from taking action. And, we talked about this a little bit today. They're psychological hindrances to action. And so a lot of times these topics are just inverse of each other. Not always, but a lot of times there are. You can have both the encouraging belief, right? Because you would have one side, it's like myths and truths, right? You have the limiting belief and you have the empowering belief that you would replace it with. And so, as an example in podcasting, one of the limiting beliefs that is fairly regular that people have is if I put out content, no one will listen to me, right? It's a limiting belief. And part of the reason for that is I'm not going to get too much into answering this question, but part of the reason people have that belief is because we have this whole social network. Like, if it doesn't get enough likes, right? If people didn't click the little heart button while I was doing it, when I put it out enough, that it's not worth my time.
Hmm.
And hopefully, we've talked a little bit about this. The attention comes from consistency over time, right? So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but that's a limiting belief. Now, the empowering belief, the flip side of that is if I put out content consistently, I will change people's lives, right? Maybe not everyone, not the whole world, but the people who listen, the people who connect with me, my audience, I'm going to impact them positively, right? And so that's how you have both a limiting belief and a positive and a empowering belief. And my suggestion again is to put together 10 in each one of these categories of empowering beliefs and limiting beliefs. Now, off the top of your head, again, I'm putting you on the spot again. Can you think of a limiting belief or an empowering belief about community?
Absolutely, but I actually have something more fun. I had a, I have a client, and one of the homework assignments that I gave to her was she's in Mexico right now, and she's feeling a little bit alone. Um, and I told her to go to the beach and post on one particular Facebook group of people that she generally trusts and likes that she's going to be at the beach at a specific time on a specific day, and that she wants people to show up and give her hugs. She was like, that's never going to happen. It's never going to work out. And the reason I'm using this is because it's exactly the same scenario. It's a little bit different story, but it's exactly the same scenario as creating a podcast and releasing it, and your fear of people not listening. So I said, post, show up. And she's like, nobody's going to show up. And I was like, two things, right? So her limiting belief was nobody's going to show up. And I said, how do we solve that? Number one, let's define what success is. I was like, how many people need to show up for it to be successful? Well, one. Okay. Do you think one person might want a hug? Yeah. You can change people's lives if just one person shows up and listens to your content, as long as it's transformational content, right? Just one person. So define what success is. Number two, I said, all right, let's say this is the first time you're posting in this group. They don't know you. They don't know if you're going to be safe or whatever. Giving hugs to a stranger is a little bit of a push, right? I said, let's say that nobody shows up. You don't even get the one that defines success. What are you going to do to make sure that this is still not a waste of time? And she's like, well, it's at the beach. Like, it's time well spent, even if nobody shows up. I was like, there you go.
Yeah, that's your empowering belief, right? Same kind of thing happens when you put content together, right? We mentioned this just a minute ago. When you put together your 10 commandments, you might discover the order that they need to go in. That's valuable, even if no one ever hears it, because you've
Even if no
understood
one
your
ever
own
hears it.
system. You've understood your own system better, and you can communicate it better than you could before you started putting the work into putting content together. So part of
And
that is
people
defining
will hear,
success.
because
People will.
you already have a product that you're already selling to customers that are already showing up. The podcast purpose is to make that whole process easier, better, more consistent, to give you exposure to customers that aren't already showing up, right? But people will hear the changes in the way that you think about things. People will hear the improvements in your message, because the customers that are already showing up are going to get your improved process. They're going to get your improved content as you deliver it to them live.
Yeah. And that's the next category, empowering beliefs, limiting beliefs. And then the last category is one I call myths and truths, right?
Mm.
And your myths and truths are fun. Same kind of thing as the authority building stuff that you do with the 10 commandments, right? There's a reason like people hold up Mythbusters as a canon for truth, which is funny because it's a Hollywood TV show with a couple of stunt-like actors. And I say stunt, that's probably not the right word. You know what they do. They're not exactly the height of scientific stuff, but they're held up that way because they're busting myths and telling truths, right? And it's the same kind of thing. You can have the same kind of power going when you're like, hey, what is a myth about podcasting, or what is a myth about community building, and what's the actual truth? And when you do that, when you take the time to build the myths, or at least show the myths, and what the myths are the kind of thing that if you've ever heard of getting someone to nod their head yes, the myths are the kind of things that if you say them, people are going to nod their heads and be like, yep, I've heard that, or I've thought that, right?
Or you're taking that one extra step that I've been waiting for somebody to take for me. Like, oh yeah, I knew something was wrong. You just answered it for me. Aha.
So it's in one of those areas where you can get those more of those aha moments. So they're kind of magical, just like the should ask questions. And again, my recommendation for you is you build at least 10 in these categories. And when you're done, you'll have between 50 and 60, depending on how many you put together in the limiting beliefs and empowering beliefs, pieces of content. And let's say you did 10 in each one of these, 10 empowering, limiting, 10 myths, 10 should ask questions, 10 frequently asked questions, and 10 commandments. you have 50 pieces of content. That's one topic per week, every week of the year, except for the 2-week vacation that everyone takes at the end of the year anyways, right? So you've built a
Well,
year's worth of
no, because
content.
we batch record, which means you can do 52 weeks worth of content without
Yeah.
worrying about losing your vacation.
Yeah. So you can build an entire year's worth of content for your show. And you can do it in generally, I do it with clients regularly in about 20 minutes because most of this stuff you already know. You have these answers in your head. And so now when you go to sit down to record, you don't have to think, what am I going to record? You can just pull out your content library and throw a dart at it or decide like we're doing and record a series like we're going to do all the 10 commandments in a row or however you want to do it. Doesn't really matter, right? And you can do them in whatever order you want and you can put them out in whatever order you want because what you're creating is you're creating valuable content that your audience will connect with, that all of them have a psychological benefit to your audience. So that's the first part,
Now,
is having a
workaround.
topic library. Go for it.
This already intentionally. So, Richard, you said, what do you have expertise in? And I said, can you get me started? It's not because I don't know what I'm an expert in. I know what I'm an expert in. I have my own podcast. It's because I wanted you to do this without having to do it yourself. This is how you work your way around writer's block. Sit down with your husband or wife and say, what am I an expert in? Your husband and wife have thoughts. They know what you're an expert in. They watch you be experts every single day. Sit down with your closest friends. What am I an expert in? They know what you're an expert in. They watch you be an expert a couple times a week, every week, couple times a month, every month for years. So sit down with the people who know you best and talk this through with them. They're going to help you identify what the expertise that you have is. They're going to help you come up with the should ask questions. They're going to help you come up with the frequently asked questions. They're going to help you come up with the myths because probably you talked to them about one of the biggest myths in your expertise yesterday. Like yesterday, you actually talked about it yesterday, but you've forgotten, but they didn't.
Yeah. My wife regularly, we have a game now where because I've been in marketing and direct response marketing for 20 years now. Makes me feel old when I say that. But when we're driving down the road, we pick apart the billboards. And so my wife has learned a lot about direct response marketing from our discussions about billboards and how they're working and what their goals are and what the audience is and what the actions that they're looking and whether or not they're effective. So she's learned a lot about direct response marketing from our discussions on there. So she can actually have a pretty high level discussion with me about direct response marketing. Right? So the people that you spend time talking to, they may not be experts, but if you've talked to them enough, they know how to help you ask these questions.
Responses from you to specific questions and just make sure that the coach knows what the goal of the sessions are that you're doing. Richard is a great coach. Richard is fantastic at coaching people through exactly this process. It's part of the reason why he's so powerful in what he does right now. So get a coach.
And that is how you build a content library. And I told you there was 3 things, and we covered 2 of them already in the previous episodes. One of them was having a mini studio. The second one is this content library we just spent the bulk of this episode talking about. And the third one for the psychological barriers to recording is not knowing what to say when you hit the start record button. Now, if you were paying attention in our last episode, we already covered this. So we're going to cover it briefly again, but I call it the WIN framework. The what, why, how, and now. Right? So if you pick pick one of your topics, right? Maybe it's the should ask question. How do I monetize my community? Right? Should ask a question. When you hit the start record button, you have 4 questions you need to answer. First one is what, right? So you might start off with, well, what is community? What is monetization? Right? Those are at least 2 things I could think that you would cover the what for, right? The purpose of the what, we talked about this yesterday, is to bring people up so they're all starting in the same place that you are, right? So they have the same definitions, they have the same understandings, so that the rest of the content that you're going to go over, they can understand because you gave them the right context. What is about giving the context? Why? Why do we care about monetizing our community? Why is about identifying an enemy, right? If you're putting it in storytelling terms, it's always about identifying the enemy. What is the reason why you care about monetizing a community, right? And why is it important? Why is it important now? Why is it important because technology has changed? Why is it important for certain groups of people and not others? There's a lot of different ways you can approach the why question, and you can you can answer all of them or not one of them or some of them. It doesn't really matter. You just got to cover some form of why. The reason why you do that, I'm doing this again, right? Why is because it gives them the emotional buy-in to your topic, right? People always make decisions emotionally first and they justify later with logic. So when you teach, and the reason you're teaching any of this content is to help people take actions in their lives, doesn't matter what it is. If you're selling flooring, you want them to buy flooring, it's going to drive to an action. People are going to take actions because they emotionally invest first and they justify later with logic. So when you're teaching, we do the same thing. Bring them to the same place so they understand, that's context. Number two, emotional justification, that's the why. So you ask the why. Then you have how. How can you monetize your community? And you can talk about lots of different things. It could be wisdom, where you're just going through, here's some ways that you can do it. It could be an interview where you have a content monetization expert come on and you have a set of questions that you're going to ask them about the different ways that they do monetization. Or it could be a coaching student that you have that is currently doing monetizing their community, and you're going to walk through a coaching session with them on how that they can do that, and you can record that, right? The how section of your content can be any number of different things. It could be an interview like you and I are doing, where we're just going to discuss the ways that you could monetize a community, right? That's the how section. And there's several different ways you could approach that. And then the last one is the now. And you've heard us do this all the time. And the now doesn't have to be at the end. It can be interspersed through the whole thing, but it's the logical justification for change. And the logical justification for change comes in one of three categories. It's stories, case studies, or examples. What you've seen us do throughout this episode is examples, right? And we're taking the examples and we're putting them in each one of the content sections, right? So we've gone through and given examples all the way through. Might be that we're telling a story, right? You actually did a story earlier about your coaching student and going to the beach, right? Stories. And then stories are almost always emotionally driven, right? What was the feelings and the thoughts and everything that are going on for someone. And then you have case studies. Case studies are just another form of story, more specifically geared around data, right? Where it's like, hey, we spent X number of dollars and on advertising and we got X number of clicks, and those X number of clicks turned into this X number of sales, right? It's a data-driven story. So you have emotional driven stories or data driven stories, or you have examples. And those are all part of delivering your perspective and your expertise on that topic. And so if you just remember those four things, what, why, how, and now, then you can talk about any subject that you want to talk about and never run into that fear of what do I say after I hit the start record button. And that's literally all you've seen us, Lucas and I, do, right? We're not working from notes. We're not working from stuff that we've pre-done. We're experts in this category, right? And you're an expert in your category. So if you have a structure, if you have a skeleton to hang your content on, it's really easy to hit start record and just start discussing the stuff that you're already an expert in. And that covers the three things that we're going to say for removing the psychological barriers to recording. One, have a studio that makes it easy to hit record. Have a content library so you have easy topics to talk about. Number four, have a content structure so it's easy to talk once you hit start record. And that's it. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I do. I want to reiterate some of the hows, because I think hows are the places that people get hung up on. So the number one, having a studio, the how was get your studio set up to be as close to permanent as you can, and it's as easy as possible for you to execute as you can. So whatever it is that branded looks like, make it easy. Choose your brand in a way that makes it easy. For you, Richard, that's having that backdrop, having the right lights, and they're all semi-permanent. So it takes you about 3 minutes to be able to go from living your life to turning on the camera and recording. The how of the content, right? The how was ask yourself these questions so that you can answer those questions. And if you can't ask yourself, get somebody else to have that conversation with you so that you can start answering those questions, right? Build your content library based on the conversation that you had. Build your content library based on the answers to those questions that either you elicited from yourself or your wife, your husband, your partner, your best friend, your colleague, your coworker, your parents elicited from you in conversation, focused on this, or a coach. And then the how of the third one, and this is important because, again, each of these three hows is different. The how of the third one was have an interview, right? It's so much easier for me to elicit conversation from you, Richard, and vice versa, for you to elicit conversation from me than it is in our case. And that's unique to each person than it is in our case when we just press the record button and start speaking to the camera. So have somebody that you're interviewing, or, and these are the hows, have your content, the thing that you're planning on talking about, mapped out and sitting in front of you, if that's the way that you need to approach the content. As Richard said, we're not working from notes. That's not the way we do this. We're experts in this, you're experts in that. But you also have to be expert in you. You have to be an expert in what it is that makes it easy for you to be able to bring the value, the content, the what, why, how, now out in that conversation that you're having with your audience in front of the camera.
Absolutely. And then if you want to, we were talking a little bit earlier about hacks, right? You can have someone work around. the workaround for this push button podcast, pbp.fm, Lucas is a client of push button podcasts, and I'm the owner of push button podcasts. And between a discussion of us, like, I have a problem sitting down and just talking to the camera. And so between some discussions, he was like, you know what, if push button podcast does better, it helps my community grow, right? Helps his podcast grow if we continue to do better and do higher level things. So it's mutually beneficial for us to hop on and do this podcast and grow this company, right? And so it could be a coaching client, it could be a coaching relationship, it could be a husband and wife, could be a friend. I've done this before with some of my best friends. Like one of my good friends in another space was like, hey, I need to record a bunch of content. Can we just sit down on Mondays for the next 3 weeks and record things? And we did, right? And he recorded a whole bunch of stuff because he just needed the conversation. And so you can do it with a friend. You can do it with a mastermind buddy. You can do it with, in this case, a client and service provider relationship if it's mutually beneficial. It could be a coaching client. There's lots of different ways you can approach this. The reality is what you're looking for is you're looking for a way, how do I make recording and getting the content out easy? How do I remove those psychological barriers to action? For me, I can't talk to a camera by myself. Can't do it. I don't know why. Never been able to. But in an interview setting, I can do it really well. So that's why we're doing it this way. And we're encouraging you to do the same thing. Whatever the psychological barrier is, remove those. Hopefully we've helped you a little bit today with some options on how you can do that. And again, we'll have the documents for you that you can have both the why, how, now structure. So you can have it like as an outline and all of these areas, right? The 5 areas of things, right? The limiting beliefs and the should ask questions, frequently asked questions as a document that you can fill out for you. pbp.fm/content. Those will be there for you. You can download them and access them there. So Lucas, thank you again so much for coming on and sharing with us on this stuff. And we'll see you on the next episode where we're going to be talking about number 4, thou shalt drive to an action. And we'll talk a little bit about what the purpose of your podcast is in the first place and how it should be helping your business grow. So that'll be the next episode for our 10 Commandments of Podcasting. Thanks for joining us this week on pbp.fm. Make sure to visit our website, pbp.fm, where you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or via RSS so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate a rating on Apple Podcasts. Or if you'd simply tell a friend about the show, that would help us out too. And if you'd like to get help building an omnipresent content marketing strategy with a podcast and you want help, you might want to book a podcast strategy session with us at pbp.fm. Just click the Book a Strategy Session button and book a time on our calendar. We look forward to speaking with you. And be sure to tune in next week for our next episode.